My friends, I'm so excited to have with us an acclaimed Canadian filmmaker. You may have seen many of his films. He's worked with some of the top actors in the industry, such as Sir Ian McKellen and many local actors. Like, I feel like when I go through his IMDb, it's like, okay, yes, I know that project. I know that friend in it. I've interviewed that person. And joining us today is filmmaker Carl Bessai, and we're here at the wonderful Miku Restaurant in downtown Vancouver at the waterfront with gorgeous views, and we'll be digging into some amazing food. See, that's the special thing. When you're doing a little show, you're like, you know what? I want to eat and talk at the same time.
Sure.
So we're here at Miku Restaurant, and we'll be talking about Carl's latest project, which is about to have its premiere at the VIF Theater.
That's correct.
I just finished watching the film, and man, it was a beauty.
Oh, so great. Yeah, we're really happy to play. They've come up with this wonderful idea called Canadian Film Week. There's a big celebration of Canadian culture, Canadian cinema in the middle of April, and so they're doing a whole week focusing on Canadian films, and they picked our movie to be part of the program. And, you know, it's a little movie. We're super proud of it, and just getting it out in the theaters and getting people to come out and see it. I mean, couldn't be better.
And you have to watch it in the theaters. And I see our lovely server is very excited to bring us some delicious food. So we'll get the food tabled here, and then we're going to dig into field sketches. I have to tell you, first of all, I don't have a television at home. Sure. I watched it on my 15-inch MacBook. And of course, not the same experience as watching it in a theater. And I love the simplicity of it. There were some words I actually wrote down on the phone that really, like, I was like, okay, I want to go back and watch the scene again. Right. There were a few scenes that really, you know, touched me, and I'm sure many individuals, whether they're artists or self-employed or not, can relate to the main character's struggles and what he's going through. I think all of us have experienced moments of what he goes through and questioning, am I on the right path? I want to burn everything down and start over again. Who am I? In the last 5 years. So we'll back up a little bit and talk about the inspiration behind you writing field sketches.
I used made the story about an architect because I have a brother who's an architect, and I've watched him work. And the architecture is a field like cinema that requires a great deal of infrastructure. So an artistic, we saw The Brutalist, for example. It's a good example of that struggle. You know, you have artistic ideas, but then you have this dynamic around the creation, and to create a building requires infrastructure, requires a lot of physical presence, you know. So sometimes in that business, an artist gets caught trying to realize a vision, but at the same time apply pragmatic tactics to get something made. You know, what could be more allegorical? What could be more relatable to a cinema maker? You know, so film is like that, right? You have personal artistic vision, and you're constantly having to fold your ideas or bend your ideas into what is considered a commercial concept, you know. And there are times in my career, I mean, I've been doing this for a long time, and, you know, as I started early days, it was always about trying to aspire to something bigger. What's the next step? How can I bring more scale into my work? The culmination, you know, when you're at a level where you have blocks of city streets closed off and trucks everywhere, and all these people, you know, 50, 100 people are there. They're working for you, supporting your vision. And there's something kind of almost the ego gratification of that. You know, you feel, wow, this must mean that what I'm doing is really important. And the thing is, that isn't what it's about. That stuff isn't what's really important. And I found recently, just the time spent doing this, by working more intimately, by scaling back this production style and working primarily with people who share my view about the work, about how to work, the actors in particular, Vince Gale, Ben Cotton, Sarah Canning, June Laporte, Tanea Beatty. Like, these are really lovely actors who really dig into the process. So I want to work with actors shaping the narrative. So the script is a thing I write, but then we spend a lot of time together before we start shooting, trying to work out some of the nuances. Sometimes that's improvised, sometimes it's just conversations, you know. But that kind of handmade hands-on, quiet filmmaking is not part of the industrial picture. And so in my allegory, my character is frustrated by chasing the money, and so he wants to try something different. But of course, there's a cost. It's difficult for him. And suddenly he realizes he can't quite make it. He's trying to get on with his life, but he has these sort of ideals, I guess we all do. And it's not working exactly. And so, he has this thing, it's something like a fantasy of mine almost, what happens when things don't work? And you just say, I'm going to take a breather here and I'm going to go out into the woods and think about things. And I love that idea, that kind of step away from it all and imagine some outcomes. What could you be thinking about? And for Vince's character, Peter, he goes into this wonderful world of his mind and he learns something about himself, which I hope we all do. And that's why we make art, to try to understand something about the world we're in and how we experience it. So super personal film, The film was shot largely in Vancouver, but also in Saskatchewan. And the location in Saskatchewan is a farm that was the homestead of my grandfather. So my father was born on this place, his brothers and sisters. I mean, it's a well of family memories, and kind of a place that is personal to me. And I just wanted to capture it in a story before it changes.
Watching this film made me have a little bit of a breather.
Sure.
It made me question things.
Well, and I think, when he goes back, it's in his mind, right? But when he goes back and he witnesses the grandmother, the escape from East Germany, and the grandmother then kind of gives him this big speech about, don't take all this for granted. What are you doing? We worked hard to give you these opportunities in your life, and here you are throwing them away. You're sitting around in the fields. Like, come on, get back to work. It's a kind of reminder that, if you could talk to your ancestors, the people who are no longer here, because this woman passed away probably when I met her, but, I was pretty young. She passed away, it was a long time ago. You imagine what they would say to you as someone who is now kind of in a place where you're approaching the age they were at. You think, well, what would they say to you? And they would say, we didn't go to all this trouble so you could just get upset, throw it away, and go pretend you're a farmer. You're not a farmer, man. You're a designer. You're an architect. Get back to work. So he kind of goes, oh, yeah, okay, I think that's what I should do. Yeah. And there was like me talking to myself saying, Carl, it's frustrating, not being satisfied as a commercial filmmaker, wanting to do things that are personal, but, you also have to pay the rent. You got stuff that you need to do. So get back to work. Get back to work, man.
But I think he had to go through that journey and of stepping away from that world to be like, I'll ask you some more questions about characters without giving the plot too much away and the ending away. Not too much. Yeah. Tell me about because you're writing and directing, and like, what was the writing process like of this? Because I went back and I wanted to replay some of the scenes, and especially the one where Ben's character George says, "We need people." I'm paraphrasing. And to me, that was such a potent line in the film, and I was like, "Oh, this would be so nice."
Ben's character's Ben Cotton, whom you'll talk with. He plays two characters.
I was curious.
So it's maybe confusing as you watch the film. I think it's poetic. I think it's magic realism. I think it's whatever you want it to be. But we did early days. I wrote a script. We had months and months of meetings and readings and conversations and script development. I like to get the actors in the room to flesh out what it is we're doing. And in the early iterations of this, it was Vincent Gale, Ben Cotton, June Laporte, who plays the daughter, Molly, and Sarah Canning. So just the four of us, and four of them and me in a room, and we're reading and we're talking. And because there's so few actors, Ben was reading a bunch of different parts, right? He's, just reading, well, you do this part and this part and this part. And then after that very first reading, I sat down with Vince a little post-mortem of the readings and the conversation. I said, would it be weird if we got Ben to play both characters, because it's so, and so it became kind of a theme, and I sort of explored it and dug into it a little more. And so we made Sarah play a couple characters, and Tanea plays a couple characters, and the only people who don't play more than one character are June and Vince, the main characters. And like in theater, you take this for granted in theater. It's not a problem. If an actor steps in and then they put on a robe and they step in again and there's someone else, and you get it. You're like, it's no problem. In a movie, it's weird, right? It's weird. But what I did with Ben was just, there's that scene where you've met George, and George is kind of a hoser, and he's got his farm clothes on, and he talks kind of he's a bit abrasive, like my real cousin George, who insisted that I call the character George just like him.
That's
It was very sweet.
Cute.
But anyway, and then when it's time for him to play Henry Thoreau, the first time you meet him, he's just in the background pulling on his period wardrobe. And you think, what's George doing putting on this period wardrobe? It's very strange. But then he speaks, and it's very different.
That's what that's what I was wondering. I'm like, his accent is changing.
Yeah, he's Henry Thoreau.
Okay.
Yeah. And Henry Thoreau is some people will know who Henry Thoreau is and some people won't, but he wrote a book called Walden, and it was about his time as a writer and artist, spending 2 years living in a cabin in the 1800s in the woods in, I think, Massachusetts, but certainly New England, Eastern USA. And he wrote this journal, and the journal is kind of an accounting of what he was going through living away from society. And it's quite a wise and interesting book. And he, to this day, is remembered as this philosophical, interesting guy. So Vince's character, Peter, thinks of Henry Thoreau as his inspiration for sort of separating himself from the kind of crudeness of commercial life, which is what Henry did. And so he takes Henry's kind of challenge, which is his purpose for going out to Saskatchewan, and he thinks, I'm going to live in a cabin and I'm going to be Henry Thoreau. But of course, Saskatchewan turns into winter. That cabin is not very warm, and he doesn't know what he's doing, right? It's bleak. It's cold and lonely and quiet, and the wind blows and it plays tricks on your mind, and you imagine things, and it's I've been obsessed with this landscape my whole life because that's what I grew up with, and so Peter's, he's kind of losing his mind a little bit, but Henry's his guide. And so once he's had the lessons, he's learned some lessons. Henry says, look, don't be afraid to go back, because society sucks, but it's also, we kind of need it. That's who we are. That's what people need. So take some time, but go back. Don't be afraid. Go back. I loved it. I'm speaking to myself.
Yeah, no. Did you take time off like this or something similar to this that inspired you to write this?
Well, I've spent a lot of time chasing money and chasing movie stars and chasing big projects, and I've done a lot of work. I've made a lot of films, and I'm at this point where I'm just really wanting to focus on ideas that deeply matter to me personally. And I respectfully don't even really care that much if they become successful or popular, because I'm not pursuing that. I'm with this film particularly, I had very specific things I wanted to explore about my own view, my own experience as a creator, what it's been like. And as a man of a certain age, I'm getting to that place in life where I'm starting to kind of step back, and I'm not the new filmmaker anymore. I'm not the kid that's exciting work is everyone wants to get a piece of that excitement. This is not my life anymore. I'm an older guy looking back a little bit. This has become a little bit meditative when you hit those ages. You're not there yet, but when you are, you'll know what I mean. And so for me, taking the time to consider the journey, it was a beautiful interview that Jane Fonda did. Jane Fonda was this was a while ago because she's much older now, but when she was turning 60, around that era, she decided she would park herself and think about her life in thirds, and that at 60, she was 2/3 of the way through. And so in that last third of her life, which was coming up, what did she want to do? How did she want to see the future? And what would she take from the past? And I think whatever age you are, you get to these decades, these places in your life along the road, and you need to slow down and take some stock. What's going on? What are you thinking about? I started doing a little teaching in the last couple of years, workshops, a course here and there, small, not full-time, just bits and pieces. But it's been really remarkable, spending time with a generation that is essentially the age of my youngest child, people in their early 20s, super excited, very tech savvy, right? They know everything about the software, the equipment, the cameras. I mean, they can do it in their sleep, but they don't have experience. And so what I come with is this old man experience. And there's something kind of really interesting about the conversation you have, old to young, and that mentorship. It's two ways. I've been really enjoying it. So all of these things are circling around in my brain, and I try to put them into the movies. So with Field Sketches, which is a small movie that I felt when we made it no one was going to see, I'm just making calls. We booked the film in Regina. We booked the film in Toronto at the Review Cinema in June. I'm trying to get a screen in Victoria. There's all these great art house cinemas that they kind of need programming. They're happy to play a film if you can.
A very Canadian film.
Yeah, you bring an audience.
Yeah.
They help you. You help them. We all make $5, and we have a great evening. I mean, to me, I'm into that. I think that's civilized.
So the film is described as very Canadian, quintessentially Canadian. What does that mean to you? And how do you see Field Sketches fitting into the broader landscape of Canadian cinema?
I mean, I think Canadian cinema is just so varied, right? I think that, to me, all Canadian cinema is made by someone who is a citizen of this country. A Canadian film can be in any language. It can take place anywhere. I don't believe in CanCon as some sort of representation of a certain kind of ethnic group or certain linguistic group. I mean, I think that's crap. So to me, being quintessentially Canadian, it means just being true to yourself. What I think is not quintessentially Canadian, which I see a lot of this in films that are made in this country that are paid for by federal and provincial funds. I see films that pretend to be set by and about America. I see that all the time. And to me, I love America. I've got lots of family there. I go regularly. I have a visa. They're my brothers and sisters for sure. But, when a Canadian film is being paid for and facilitated by the Canadian culture industries, it should be not about America. I mean, to me, it just drives me crazy when, people set their film in ambiguous Nowheresville, and the American money comes out in the scene. Yeah. And you just think, ambiguous Nowheresville, where's that? Have you ever seen an American movie that's set in ambiguous Nowheresville? You never have. It's always very clear. Oh, it's Chicago. It's, whatever. But we're like, well, we won't say it's I thought this was an amazing film. Megan Park, a lovely actor / now famous director who I had the pleasure of working with on a movie, has made 2 movies. Her second movie, My Old Ass, great film, set in the Muskokas, set in Canada. She didn't have to do that. It's paid for by Americans.
Yeah.
The entire infrastructure behind that movie is American, but Megan Park wanted to tell her story.
Yeah.
Kudos to Megan Park. I mean, why is Megan Park does that and has huge success? No one in America is bothered by its being set in Canada. She does that, and yet filmmakers here are constantly counterfeiting, pretending that their film is set in America because they think somehow that it'll be more marketable, or someone tells them that.
Yeah.
It drives me crazy.
Yeah, no, I love your passion about it, and I love the passion for this Canadian film. How do you see Field Sketches contributing to the conversation about personal and artistic identity?
Well, I mean, I think good films, I mean, I tend to be my curse is I talk a lot, and so when I write a lot. So I'm always too much dialogue, and sometimes I'm on a soapbox a little too much, saying what I think through my characters, which can be annoying. Show don't tell, is the is the motto that I've never really learned. Anyway, but I feel like questions questions and conflict are the essence of cinema. I think that you need to have a few things for a film to resonate. I think you need to have some kind of a feeling of empathy toward a character whose journey you're watching. If there's no empathy, it's hard to care. So I need to care. So that was a goal. I think you need conflict. You need to have, you need to enter into the story at a point where things aren't quite working for the character. That conflict drives the plot, drives the story, drives your interest. Without conflict, I think it's difficult. And conflict is something I've thought a lot about because it is the essence of drama, but conflict can be visual. Conflict can be in contrasting light. Conflict can be in sound. There's conflict everywhere. Conflict meaning juxtaposed opposites. And so I think urban life, rural life, weather changes, the warmth and the color of the West Coast and the bleakness and cold of Saskatchewan and the kind of, the way you sort of imagine the past. It's always a little bit sepia, this kind of thing. So I really feel like these are ways into themes that I'm interested in. And I think the film should be asking questions. What is the essence of a life spent making art? Do you take your bow and walk away? Do you keep working because you care, regardless of what the commercial outcome is? I mean, we're so tied to commerce in everything that we do. It's something that's the reality, but it's also sometimes a little bit disturbing, that the value of something financially is the equation about whether it's worthy. If a painter sells a painting for a lot of money, it must be a great painting. I don't know. It's a question, so I want to ask those questions.
So which is so great. I'm sure your students, like you're mentioning, teaching, and even for me having this opportunity to sit down with you, watch your film, and hopefully I'll get to see it again. It really makes someone like me sit back. I'm certainly not a filmmaker,
right,
but as an artist,
look at you.
Making TV shows.
You can't see, but she does it all herself, which is amazing.
Yeah, which, sadly, no one really knows. They're like, what?
Yeah, but that's amazing.
But I would love to hear what advice you would give to individuals out there, whether it's documentaries or narratives.
I mean, I was thinking about just kind of doing that Jane Fonda deep past review, of my life, just because that's where I'm at, So as I review my life, thinking about what people said to me and what got me going or got me thinking about stuff. I remember as a young guy, I was trying to get into cinema. I was interested in drama. I came from a documentary background. I had been a cameraman in like a news show, and I was doing like field shooting.
Show.
It was like a magazine show, but it was good. It was a real primer in kind of get out there with the camera, get the pieces, get back to the edit room. Oh, you didn't get enough pieces. You know what I mean? It was a real primer. But I thought, okay, I want to go next step. I want to go into this bigger world. So my way in was the camera department, because camera was always this thing that it was just my skill set, is what I was interested in. So I got in this camera team, and I was a trainee, so early days, learning from the ground, about everything in the camera department on a giant set. And the DP that I had the good fortune of working for was a guy named Fred Elms. And if you don't know who Fred Elms is, you can look him up. I mean, he's a very famous cinematographer, and he did Blue Velvet, for example, the David Lynch film. So Fred is he's an old gentleman now, super DP. And he did this thing. One day, he just invited me to lunch because he wanted to get to know everyone who worked for him. And I was at the bottom of the food chain, right? So I'm sitting there kind of nervous having lunch with Fred. And he's like, so, Carl, what do you want to do? What's your plan, goal? Like, what are you thinking? He knew I was working for him right now, but what was my long-term goal? And I said, well, gee, Fred, I don't know. I kind of want to do what you do, be a cinematographer. And he said, well, Carl, I think you need to get out there and start shooting. Don't stay too long, loading film and carrying cases and doing this kind of job. It was a good job, but it was a hard job. And it was the kind of industrial job that didn't necessarily have anything to do with actual cinematography. So it's easy to get put in a lane in the film business and get stuck in that lane and spend your whole life in that lane and then be afraid to leave that lane. And Fred's advice was, don't be afraid, leave the lane.
Yeah.
And so I just was like, yeah, I'm going to go out and shoot stuff. And so they always remember that. And my advice to anyone is, if you've got something you're passionate about, like there's lots of room for more artistic, passionate people. There's no there's no kind of, oh, I'm sorry, we've got too many filmmakers already. It feels like that sometimes.
Yeah.
Like you apply to a film festival, there's 5,000 films and you're never going to get in.
Even for accreditation for media. It's
Totally. A festival like Cannes will receive over 10,000 films. 10,000 films. And as a guy who screens films sometimes for other festivals, I can tell you, if I really, really, really focus, I can maybe watch 50 movies. So 10,000 films. It means that if there's 10,000 movies, maybe there's 1,000 movies or 500 movies, of which only 100 will get picked or 200 will get picked. 500 movies that are amazing movies. So what's the difference between the 500th film and the first or second film? Smoke. Who knows? Who knows? So it's super competitive. But that's not what it. What are you doing it for? Are you doing it because you want a prize? Because you want someone to tell you how great you are? Because you want a lot of money? There's way better ways to make money if that's what you want. If you're interested in exploring an idea and you think this is a medium that you can communicate in, that's gold. That's it. But you got to do it, and don't let the lack of agency, lack of money, don't let that stuff stop you. Field Sketches is my 24th or 5th movie of my life, and it was made for peanuts, and it was made like that for a reason.
Carl Bessai, wow, what an honor sitting here with you. Getting some of that festival energy. We're here with an amazing Canadian filmmaker who took the time to join us on this beautiful day here in Vancouver. You're watching On Location Vancouver, brought to you with the support of TELUS STORYHIVE. Thank you so much for tuning in. Until next time, I'll catch you soon. Ciao.